Let's see. Perfect. Okay, now you can. Do you want to get the floor? Well, it's Christina presented. Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. So we are welcome to the second talk of the Botanical Encounter series. Thank you for coming. There are some more talks coming and leaflets are available on the side for the next few ones. So we have one once a month about that frequency and they are all free. And so tonight we are going to have a talk Plants and People Between Uncertainty and Resilience by Lucia Hunt. Lucia is a freelance artist educator who works with objects, live action, drawing, and film. She has devised and delivered creative workshops, including at schools and community workshops, and she created events for various organizations. She works, for example, as art educator at the Urban Museum, where she's involved in the Pathways to Wellbeing project, and also for Arts for People with Sydney Gardens and the All Weather Art Club for young people with disability. She has also worked as a creative facilitator for Alive, which is a charity based in Bristol, engaging activity with older people and people with dementia. So tonight she's going to talk about her project in Brazil and other projects, including some that she has done in Rome very recently, and I hand it over to her.
Thanks, Christina. I think you just spoke out the first part of my talk there, but so I can cut that bit. Yeah, thanks so much for being here, everybody in the room, and also I know there's lots of people, or some people, I don't know how many, in sort of cyberspace somewhere. So thanks also for everybody who's here today. Today I'm going to share my projects with you, as Christina said, and I'm going to take you on a journey from the herbarium at the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew to the northeast of Brazil, and then back full circle to near where I live, Frome, in Somerset. I'm going to share some of the people and places I've encountered on the way, and my art in response. You know, I'm not some big intellectual, I don't have the answers to everything. I'm an artist, and I explore aspects of life and I process and respond to this. But I thought a really nice way to start today would be a little bit of film that was actually made by my daughter Ruby and edited by her. And it comes from a project called Weeds Our Community. And I did this in collaboration with Claire Beale, who's sitting right over there and is now giggling. And she's an artist also who lives in Frome, and she's absolutely awesome, so you should check her out. She's really embarrassed now. So I thought it would be a great place to start here because it will just relax us, and it's also a great full circle because it's where my talk will sort of end at this project. So I'm not going to really say much about this film now, but I'll tell you a bit about it afterwards. And the voice that you're going to hear is that of Kamal Mahesh Sharma. So this is the moment I look over here, and hopefully you might have a look at my film. I just made a real piece of it a moment ago.
Om Sri Siddhi Vinayaka Namaha Om Sri Chintamani Vinayaka Namaha Om Sri Sarvasakti Vinayaka Namaha Om Sri Sarvakarye Sadhikam Vinayaka Namaha Om Sakalam Sadhyam Sadhyam Jayam Jayam. Om Sri Siddhi Vinayaka Namaha Om Sri Chintamani Vinayaka Namaha Om Sri Sarvasakti Vinayaka Namaha Om Sri Sarvakarye Sadhikam Vinayaka Namaha Om Sakalam Sadhyam Sadhyam Jayam Jayam. Om Sri Siddhi Vinayaka Namaha Om Sri Chintamani Vinayaka Namaha Om Sri Sarvasakti Vinayaka Namaha Om Sri Sarvakarye Sadhakam Vinayaka Namaha Om Sakalam Sadhyam Sadhyam Jayam Jayam.
Don't panic. We're all okay here. Okay. Just to continue, I think Christina just probably covered a bit about me. I'm an artist, but I'm also an artist educator, and I worked, I think, as was said, at the Holborn Museum. I've actually worked on many different projects over these however many years. Some very small and some really big ones, including, sort of I had to coordinate quite a lot of people and things, and they'd be big interactive events, very exciting things. And yes, I've worked with the Holborn Museum's Pathways to Wellbeing, which is a fantastic project supporting people's mental health. And in Sydney Gardens, the Parts of People project is part of their Heritage Lottery funding, and anybody who lives here in Bath knows that there's been renovating the parks, amazing old pleasure gardens. And my job was about engaging people, bringing them to the park, people who might not necessarily be in the park, and creating sort of trails within the park based on heritage, or they've got sort of these exotic and champion trees there also. So the aspect of creativity, it's an important part of my practice, connecting with people, creating nurturing spaces where people feel a sense of belonging, but not just people, myself as well. Spaces where people can talk and share. I think particularly since the pandemic, it's just become so important. It doesn't really matter what we make, what we do. It's the process, being together, and just that feeling of togetherness, which sounds a bit corny, but it just is something very fundamental for me. I studied sculpture with time-based media at Wolverhampton University, and in the second year I studied at São Paulo University in a placement at ECA, that's the art school there. And I think I was the first British person they had there in the department, and it was a very steep learning curve. And my Portuguese was really quite minimal then, and it's pretty bad still, actually, to be honest. And it was just a wonderful place where I engaged with people, a really diverse group of people, and I'm still friends with many of those people today. My dad, he's a botanist and has worked at Kew Gardens since before I was born. And he now partly lives in the northeast of Brazil with my stepmom. She's Brazilian and she's a botanist, a really respected botanist who she's very inspirational. She's an amazing woman. I've been recording partly her life story, and there's amazing stories about living through a dictatorship and being a woman at the front of all of this, pushing on in science, is very inspirational. She originally came from Pernambuco, that's in the northeast of Brazil. Another thing that's not always a positive in those environments where people don't want you to be from the northeast. And much of her professional life was spent in São Paulo. Let's move on. Oh no, hasn't moved. Oh. There, I've just done it by my magic of my finger. This slide, oh no, actually, that was already, and now what I really want is the next slide. That's one of my drawings there. That's the one I was looking for. Now this is, my dad's in here. I'm not going to tell you which one my dad is, you'll have to guess. And this was an expedition he took in 1971. It's the year of my birth. That's something else you can work out how old I am. And it's in an area of the Chapada Diamantina, and I'll be coming back to that area as we move along in my journey. It's, yeah, I think it's the beginning, but apparently did come back from when I was born. But just my projects based on plants and people began when I was invited to take part in some discussions and talks at Hester Coombe House in Taunton, and that's in Somerset. It's like an old manor house, and I don't know if anyone's been there here in England, but it has these amazing gardens designed by Edwin Lutyens, and the plantings designed by Gertrude Jekyll. And it's got this great gallery, and I really like it because it's a sort of in-between space. It has a flexibility to it, and I just think it's doing its own thing. It's, you know, it hasn't got the white walls of a gallery. It's got slightly, dare I say it, scruffiness of an old manor house. And it kind of has an allowance to it, sort of lets you in somehow. It feels accepting. You know, this is just important to me. Now, the discussions we were having in that space were about heritage and environment and my role as an artist. And this led me on to conversations with my dad. Now, I have always, about plants that is, and I've always avoided having conversations with my dad about plants. I think he's listening to this now. I always have a bit of a love-hate about plants. I don't think it's probably a great thing to say, is it, in a series of talks all about botany and things like that. But I was a child of the 70s, and I grew up very much sort of barefooted. My hands and feet were often in the earth. I knew which plants I could eat. I knew which I would make potions from. You know, I knew some of the names of plants, but it didn't really matter to me. And you know, I would make dens from plants. I'd make some little places to hide. Whereas plants in my dad's world were of the botanical world, botany, taxonomy, and it was a language and a place, a club. I didn't really feel like I belonged. You needed to be intellectual in this for this world and speak a different language, that of Latin and science. And as a child, I used to go to the herbarium at Kew with my dad, where his plant collection is. I desperately wanted to run up and up the spiral. They've got these 2 spiral staircases, and I always wanted to kind of go crazy and run up and down. But you know, I had to be quite well behaved, and he'd often be talking to quite older botanists who sadly sort of disappeared now in the Bavarian area. And also walking with my dad as a child wasn't fun. Sorry, Dad. I love my time with you, but I'm just saying, you know, I wanted to run, I wanted to skip, I wanted to jump around. But he, and I love him for this, and he used to, and still does, he used to always stop. He'd just take ages looking at plants. You know, you'd walk in some beautiful place, and then every few seconds he'd stop and have to look at this interesting specimen, which isn't the funnest thing when you're a child. It also took him away from me. I didn't grow up with him at home, but he'd often be away for, you know, maybe 6 months at a time on some expedition in Brazil too. But after an offhand comment, I think we were walking in Richmond along the riverside there. There was an offhand comment that my dad made whilst we were looking at these plants. And I realised that every plant is an individual, having sometimes minute or quite obvious differences, and that separated from its neighbour. And although that doesn't sound like earth-shattering news, for me as an artist, it kind of stood out as something quite amazing. You know, I consider the landscape as a sort of an expansive green. You know, I kind of thought of plants as being in family groups. I'd never thought of them as individuals in their own right. And, you know, as humans, I think we think of ourselves solely as unique, we're individuals, you know, parts of families or communities, but it started this whole way of thinking for me, sort of ball rolling of this sort of parallel to plants and people and a different way of thinking about it. And here we are, we're finally at the herbarium in Kew. So in 2019, I gained a bursary from Somerset Artsworks, and who've been very supportive in my projects, actually. And this was to further study these ideas I was having and explore the botany of both my dad and myself. This took me back to Kew Gardens, the herbarium, and to explore my dad's plant collection there, to talk about the aspects that interested me, such as taxonomy, making order of seeming chaos, the pinning down of something which is evolving and changing, how the order and certainty sits alongside uncertainty, human relationships and emotions. Because I don't know about you, but often, you know, we have this whole sort of structure of things, don't we? Oh dear, getting overexcited there with my clicker. There we are, we're back to there, I'll put it down. You know, everything has a sort of order, you know, with society and establishments and things. It sort of has a kind of equilibrium of the way things are. But underneath the surface, I feel, you know, as a child growing up and things, we have this entanglement of human, you know, our humanness, of relationships and sort of things that are sort of uncomfortable perhaps and painful, that aren't sort of part of this more established world, structured world, I suppose. And this is actually one of the plants from my dad's collection. I just like I like the way, this is his description of a plant. It's like, where are we? Vegetative shoots, very mint-like, with reddish stems and crisp green leaves. Flowering shoots much branched, axillary inflorescence globose poricellate. Calices whitish green, corolla pale pink. And there's my dad. He's a bit older here. There we are. And there are those amazing spiral staircases that I was itching to run up and down. You can see those sort of boxes of order, and all of those full of plants, and all sort of squished into these different layers of paper and those little labels. Oh. Yes, and whilst I was doing this bursary, I got the opportunity to exhibit my work in progress in a studio in Frome in Somerset, as part of Somerset Art Weeks, which is lots of exhibitions that happen all sort of at the same time. And the title of this, got loads of things going on the screen, haven't we? Can I get rid of that? I don't know. The title of this is Unknown Ways, and it refers to ideas and ways of living and being that are yet unknown or lost in time. And actually, these suspended pieces were based on a little time machine I made as a child, and it was made from hair grips and cotton and stones, and it was, you know, it was about that. So I remember taking it to infant school with me, and I had total conviction that it worked. And I think it was really a bit to sort of have some sort of control over my own life. I'm going to completely lose where I am now. That excitement. So, Unknown Ways started with questioning how I can quantify, catalogue, archive the bits in between, and how do all these bits fit into our established world, past, present, and future. They're a bid to capture elements of thoughts, feelings, and emotions which are reaching out, looking back and forward in time, and yet are here and now in the moment. They could be aspirational, lamenting, feared, or just holding in there. And each of these pieces, let's just see if I can, oh, there we go. Christine, okay, some of those little thingy jigs over the picture, because I feel like it's, sorry. Let me do that. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's better. It's just slightly less going on there. They all have a sort of tension to them, so they had kind of struts in them with these sort of strings, kind of holding them taut. And then these sort of foamy, sort of floppy bits to them. It's kind of a tangle. And then these tangly bits of sort of thread and cord that sort of had tangles. And I don't know if anyone's been to the Amazon, it's a very messy place. Things are entangled together and sort of twined around each other. You know, people with their topiary gardens, it's not like that in the Amazon. It kind of looks like a mess, but a very beautiful mess. And I love that. And then I had these discs. You can see the white plaster discs in these piles on the floor. And they were actually remnants from my casting buckets and from my workshops. And for me, they're an encapsulation of time, because when you're casting plaster, it's all about timing, actually. First of all, you mix the plaster into the, well, you don't actually pour the plaster into the water, and then you can leave it for a few minutes whilst you fuss around doing other things, because it won't go off until you actually mix it, and then you mix it. And then when you leave it, you can, there's a certain point you can put your hand on it and you can feel the warmth of the plaster as it has this chemical reaction. And I've always loved that sort of rhythm and process of making plaster of Paris. So I tipped these out of my bucket and I put them in these piles. And then in between these pieces of plaster were these little circles, discs of, there was some waxed paper and others were painted paper in different colours with writing on. And for me, they were like hidden bits you couldn't see, like hidden bits of life and history and things that were sort of disregarded, really, not thought to be that important, but for me, the most significant for me personally in my life and in others, I think. I think my brother came into this exhibition and just said, oh, I can see the whole family's in here. So, and then in 2020, the pandemic hit, and this project took a backseat for a while, this Brazil. I was concerned about my dad and Anna, who was stuck in Brazil with Bolsonaro, and it's frightening to steer back to a dictatorship, I felt. Instead, like many, I walked. I walked a lot in this place called Ashen Quarry, which is near where I live. It's a decommissioned quarry, but they're threatening to open it up again, and I'm sure they will, you know, with the powers that be. And it's a space you're not meant to go, actually. This part is kind of shut off, and they keep rebuilding the fence, but every time you come back, someone's broken the fence down, made a new pathway, found a way in, and I think I unwittingly used to walk there without knowing it, but now I definitely walk there on purpose. And I really didn't like the space to start with. It's kind of stark, you know, it's stark and barren. But it sort of grew on me and became a place of solace eventually. It sort of has a threatening feeling to it. It's got these huge abandoned buildings, the concrete structures. Oh, I can't say that. Concrete structures. But there's evidence of humans there. You know, I could hear the sound of motor, and occasionally one would just whiz on through, and you just curl your body back as these young adults were there. Having fun. It was really just, they were claiming the space as theirs. And graffiti also was there, freshly painted quite regularly. And it was really not your rubbish stuff, it was great graffiti, some really lovely graffiti. And also the evidence of partying. So there was often sort of fires, you know, there were always fires with the ash, a few NOS canisters too. And, you know, it just gave me, it was like a beacon of hope at a time when we weren't meant to be going out or doing much. You could walk once a day, perhaps. And I just felt this energy around me of young people doing what they wanted, a kind of fairly marginalised group, honestly. And also alongside that, we have nature. So, you know, nature was pushing up through this concrete, this tarmac, or this sort of earthen ground, particularly birch trees, which were sort of wiry and strong. And as an artist in this space, I just felt, after the initial feeling, felt a sense of belonging. I felt like I could come and play here. And exactly what you can see me doing here. I'd come here with a friend called Martin Wade. Are you watching, Martin? I don't know if you are. And he's a photographer, and he sort of uses large format to take photos. And it was just so great to feel a sense of belonging somewhere where you could sort of do something. It didn't matter if it went wrong. You could use the whole space. You could work small, you could work big, and use your body in a way. You can see here I've used strings, and then I'm interacting with the plant life. And then I've got the domesticity of a chair at the end. It often comes into my work too. And here we have what we call the Toblerone. And this is one of Martin's amazing photos. And in the foreground of that, you can see the birch trees that push up there. They're just starting to take over the whole space. And I know that this made me feel like everything was all right. Even if the human race go down, by golly, those plants are going to carry on, push on through. They're going to be ripping your house apart and growing out of the chimneys and ripping the windows out. And it's all right. And then I made a collection of works called Beacons, and I was going to attempt to show you the film for this, but I don't think I am today. But this is actually still, but it's part of a film, and this is my daughter Ruby, and it was a type of semaphore actually, and these were very heavy, so they were very hard to move around. And I didn't have to prompt her hardly at all. She did the most beautiful dance, of a sort of semaphore type dance with these, and they kind of moved up, and sometimes they moved down and around, and then they'd move like this, and sometimes she'd move them back. So there was a sort of beautiful continual movement of these beacons that she was holding, and then you could see the strain in her arms to do it as well. And it was a lovely thing, and it was on a continual loop at an exhibition a group exhibition I was part of, with some other objects and things that were part of it. We have arrived at Chapada Diamantina. This amazing environment with these huge, really amazing rock formations, and some of them sort of come out of the ground like this, they kind of bobble out at the top, sort of quite phenomenal. So in May this year, I was invited to be artist in residence. I'm going to get some more water because I know I'm going to lose my voice in a minute. So I was invited to be artist in residence after applying and a Zoom interview, don't like Zoom interviews, at Miranti Shiki Shiki in Igatu. And I hope possibly somebody is watching from this wonderful residency. It's in the northeast of Brazil, and it's 2.5 hours from the house where my dad and Anna live in the mountains. The starting point for my residency was a group of botanical trails written in a publication, in fact it's here, in a publication by my dad and Anna, The Wildflowers of the Chapada Diamantina. There we go. And it's in English and in Portuguese, and it sort of seems to be colour coordinated actually. And the walks, they're not overly, botanical in respect of, they're not just really for botanists, they're for everybody. And I kind of wanted to explore it. You can come look at it at the end if you want, it's just here. Yeah. So where was I? I'll just find out where I was. Sorry. And obviously, the name Chapada Diamantina is an area of, in the past of diamond mining. So it's got all these boom towns, and Igatu is one of those boom towns. And so, before I got to my residency, which was a 3-week residency, I spent 6 weeks in Brazil. I went by my dad's house and Anna's house in Rio de Pontus, which means the River of Songs. They've all got lovely names. It's a small and lively town, and it's, as I said, in the mountains, and it has its own archive and a theatre. It's a really interesting little town, actually. It gave me time to properly arrive in Brazil. And I also walked quite a few of those trails in the book. And actually, that picture in the middle is of one of the trails. It's hand drawn by my dad. I think it's quite quaint himself. On the left, we have that's Orlando Santos, and he's like an amazing plant knowledge and a guide. And so he took us up Pico das Almas, and he often supports my dad and Anna when they're going out to explore and find plants. And I really want to work. I think we're planning to try and work together on this project a bit that I'm hoping to take forward. He was born in one of the quilombos. He now lives in Rio de Pontus. Now there's about 3 quilombos that are settlements that are near Rio de Pontus, and they were created by people of African origin around the time of slavery and after it was abolished. And there on the right, that's Anna's plant, her specialism. And I actually asked my dad to try and pronounce it for me because my pronunciation of Latin names is absolutely abysmal. I'll tell you it begins with an E. And I know my dad's watching this and we're going, come on, Lucy, you can do it. No, I'm not even going to do it. But it's part of the Semperviva family, or their Sempervivas. And you can get ones that are like teeny weeny. And in fact, I think that's what Orlando's looking at over there, is one teeny, and they're huge. They're really bizarre, sort of bobbly plants, but they're sort of beautiful as well. But they are ones that are traditionally used within bouquets, wedding bouquets in the northeast particularly, but they've also been hugely exported, and then they've now been protected because they were getting it's getting very dangerous with the exportation of them, you know, becoming extinct, certain ones. Let's see where we. This is just a little bit from my sketchbook at that time, and the drawing on the left is taken from it's the flora of Pico de Zamas. So I was looking at botanical drawings in that, sort of anatomical ones of plants, and looking at those. It really annoys me that pencil looks really blunt. I hate a blunt pencil, just have to say that. And the other drawing it's actually a rubbing with paint. And in that, I was thinking about my walking and the sort of dialogues that go on, maybe internal dialogues, or the talking I did when I was walking with my friends. And that kind of journey you take inside yourself when you're walking, what it does to you, it sort of got me thinking about that. And then, just on the way, we haven't quite got to Iga 2 yet, just so you know, we're in Mukaje here. And I've actually got a t-shirt that says Mukaje on it, but the G is done in such a way that when people read it, it's a green t-shirt, it looks like it says mucus. Just have to share that because it's quite funny. So here we have on the left, we have, this is a museum in Mukaje, and it has the entrance to the national park there, which is a protected area with the most amazing plants and biodiversity there. And as we get into Mukaje and onwards into Iga 2, everything is built on or in or surrounding rock. So that rock you see there is rock, and that building has been built around it, and the rock pushes through in every part of that building. All those bits of rock you see are just what's there, which is there, and probably a lot was maybe excavated, removed, I don't know. But it's like some weird Bond, you know, like going to a sort of Bond movie. I love it. But the interesting part, and I'll probably explain this really badly, I'm sorry, Dad, if you're listening, is that it's it's a museum of Semperviva. And obviously that's a specialism of Anna, and they helped establish this museum and set it up, and now it's got some amazing people running it there all the time. And then we have on our right, slightly obscured by a view of me, which is a shame, is Victor. And he works in Mukaje Market, and then he's selling medicinal items, all plant-based medicinal things, and he knew what each of them did and all the properties. And that's something you find in the northeast, is that everybody seems to know about medicinal plants and their uses. Even when we went out with Orlando, he had particular sort of anti-venom. Well, it wasn't an anti-venom, but it's a treatment if you got bitten by a snake. It was some sort of plant-based item, which I've taken some notes of somewhere, but I can't give the details if you're hoping for those. But there we go. I'll let you look at that for a second whilst I have another sip of water. We finally arrived in Iga 2. And this is my residency group, bar Eduardo is taking a photo, and that's Leo and Dennis on the left, who run the residency at Miranti Shiki. And they're amazing, actually, and they just know how to connect people together. They bring all sorts of people together in that residency, and they somehow make it a smooth ride. And Leo, he cooks breakfast in the morning, the most delicious breakfast I can't find for those. And it just is a good start to the day. And then we have Isha to my right, who makes film, is a curator. She does amazing things. I think she was based in New York. I could have got that wrong. And now last time I knew, she was living in Salvador. And this is Stephanie and Hakel at the end, and they're both writers and also run this really fantastic press. So they publish books about very diverse subjects, really interesting subjects, and they're very exciting people. And also Hakel, she also does sound recording with me, so we had a lot of fun doing weird sound recording. She always sort of slips it along the table, you know she's recording somebody, and she does that with her phone. And yeah, and I can't lie, it's a most amazingly beautiful place. And there I have my book, The Sex Life of Plums. It's a very good book. It is cheesy, I know, but it's actually got lots of little interesting facts in that I learned a lot from this book. And there actually is Shiki Shiki, and that is a cactus. So Igatu was originally called Shiki Shiki, and it's this cactus, and it's eaten. And to eat it, you have to burn it, because you cannot access it without that, because the spines are really quite vicious. So there I was at the residency, and everybody was really busy getting on with it. The writers are writing, the filmmakers are making film, and I was having a personal crisis, because I was like, oh, and I had been used to looking after my children and having family things around me, and not having really, as an artist, much space and time to do my practice. So suddenly I was given complete freedom to make work. And it was difficult to get started, but then suddenly, as I often do, I claimed a little space, and it was the space where we walked up to do our laundry. It was still in the safe confines of the residency, and I gathered some charcoal from a bit of burnt land that I'd found. That's the cotton at the top is from my dad's quintal, which is the bit where he grows his vegetable and fruit in his garden. And then we had rocks, and the blue is like light prints. They're kind of paper sensitive, light sensitive papers that I lay on top of each other. So that was my beginning point, sort of traveling across the space, finding my feet in the space, arriving. And it was a great beginning until very shortly after that, I became ill for about 5 days, but I won't give you the details of that. So connecting with local people was a really important aspect of my project. And art making, but it's the most challenging. You know, it takes time to engage with people, and I find often in my education practice, people always want me just to kind of fly in and make some really meaningful engagement with people. You just can't do that. It takes time. You know, you've got to build up the layers of getting to know each other, etc. But I was very lucky in Igatu because, you know, generally people were very friendly, they were interested, and they were really open. So this is a picture of Amarildo dos Santos, and he's a local census maker, and he also works in the tourist office. And it's just like the tiniest, it's like a little cube box with sort of glass frontage, and he's got a sort of table and a chair, and then there are just piles and piles and piles of paperwork. And when he's not serving people in the tourist office, which I think is probably quite a lot of time of that, he's making a census, but he made publications that he sold, and he did them all meticulously by hand. So I think only the front cover was photocopied, so he'd always have one that he'd be copying from, and I bought one, and it was all about him. It's here, so see it to everybody there. Anyway, it was about his life. So it went through sort of infancy, schooling, etc. But the bit that really excited me was near the end. And it says, and this is on Black Portuguese, this is where all the people who are watching in Brazil are going to cringe. Sonhos que dependem de ajuda dos amigos para realizá-los. And this means dreams that depend on the help of friends to make them come true. And then he bullet pointed all the things that he wanted, you know, his dreams that he wanted to come true with the help of friends. And that included meeting Shusha. Now, Shusha I remember her when I was a student at the uni in USP, and she was blonde, she was very bouncy, she was on the telly a lot, and I often turned the telly off when she came on quite quickly. But she was married to Ayrton Senna. So that was kind of an interesting little fact. So it was ambitions, it was dreams, aspirations of a human, and the fragility of those feelings. They just touched a chord with me, and so I made a piece of work. So this piece of work is mainly wood. So we've got wood, those little sections at the top. Unfortunately, it's cut off by that really annoying bit. There's a little kind of, it's got a little sort of signal bit at the top, a bit like a finger. It sort of goes up like a flagpole, and then that little bit's at the top. And they're kind of coloured or painted. And then I've got a stool made of wood below. And then that tablecloth is just a paper doily that I created myself. And the stool actually was a found object that I bought from Mukaje Market. And the man, I presume the man selling it, made it. And it was important to me it was a made object, because I knew that to make something like that, which kind of, you could look at it and go, it's a bit rubbish, well, very well made. I know that to make something like that, just a simple object to be made by hand, is incredibly involved. It takes a lot of time to make something from scratch. I don't know if anyone's ever made a stool or a thing. It's not easy. You've got angles, you've got things to think about. And I know that there would have been some striving involved in making that stool. And it was important to have that striving effort as the basis for this elevated dream on top. And those elevations, those reaching up to, you know, aspirational feelings and thoughts as a human being. And this piece of work travelled around to the doorways of neighbours. I kind of like, every time I'm near, it's sort of echoing at you, it's okay. And this is me really trying to engage now. You know, I found it a lot easier to engage with plants. I could talk to plants, I could read about them in books, but people, it's not so easy. But I found that there were a couple of places I found much more comfortable and sort of natural to talk to people. You can just hang around on a street corner and start chatting to someone. That's weird. This is the washing area, the communal washing area. People hung up their washing. And the other place was the supermercado. The supermarket was a really natural place to chat and kind of interact with people. And you can see here, I've got a little person down there. And that's actually one of the last person in the photo I showed of the expedition. And his name was, I got him here, where is he? Raimundinho, this founder. So Raimundinho was, his name was Raimundo Souza, actually, and I'll just read out what my dad said in his letter. He was my field assistant for the 5 months I spent in Mato Grosso on that trip. He was a wonderful, efficient, but rather silent man who knew the names of so many of the plants. He was a technician and worked at the Museum Geldi in Belém. Sadly, he died only a few years later, so I could not renew our friendship again. I'm going to let you look at this beautiful photo. Just take another second. So this is Donna Zalito, and she was another person that I was really lucky to meet. She was in her sort of 80s, one of the older members of the community, and quite often we'd go for lunch in this little restaurant that was kind of elevated, and across the street I could see her. I could see her in the doorway, coming out, sweeping leaves, hanging up her washing, watering her plants. And it wasn't until later I realised that she actually owned the restaurant as well. And, you know, I'd be there eating my beans and rice, just watching, sort of, I kind of hid. I couldn't see her and sort of do this. I didn't want to look like, you know, spying on her, although I was spying on her. And then one day I came out, we came out of the restaurant, and she kind of beckoned us over. And so we went over, and she just wanted us to come in and have a chat. So we came in and we sat down in her humble home. And she continued to tell us about her life with such humour. And, you know, there was a lot of sadness. She'd lost her husband. She'd had 8 children. She'd lost quite a few of those children. And she said that she had her daughter, her youngest daughter, living with her, but it was the child she didn't want, she said. She said she would keep on working until her last days, and that things had changed around there. But some things got better, some not. And then she also showed her lace making and how she did that, and her crocheting. But that wasn't the important thing. She just really just wanted to talk. So this was an ode to Donna Zalita, and this is a funny piece of work because I really absolutely had no time whatsoever to think or make it, in respect of I just had to go and grab some things and kind of come on down. And I think Leo and Dennis were there, and I think they wanted to take some photos of me, and so it wasn't the final piece, it was the actual making of the piece that was the piece. It was a fun day. It was kind of buzzy. There were quite a few people around. We kind of got, you can see this group of young men there looking at me going, what the hell is she doing? Which is kind of nice. I didn't get to talk to them. I wish I had at the end, but they were just like, what? And at different stages, it included the shiki cactus, which you can see there in that first picture. It had the hallucinogenic flower, Angel's Trumpet, which is that flower at the top there. And actually, that plant to the right of the picture is the flower. It's an amazing flower. And we did hear a whole story about somebody drinking tea and going kind of crazy for about weeks on end. So if you ever come across it, don't make tea from it. So, and we had tapioca, we had urucum and piqui. Piqui is that very bright orange coloured at the top in that bottle. And they're both natural ingredients used in cooking. And then I had a piece of Donna Zalita's crochet. Actually, her actual name, she told us, was Maria Jose, actually, but everybody called her Zalita. So her very vivid coloured yellow crochets there, and some flowers that were the sort she had in her garden were underneath there too. And I think somewhere you can see Heimondinho is there also. We had everybody was there. So that was built up and then it came down again. And this is right at the end of my talk, and what a shame, because my stupid face is on top of the most beautiful person I want you to meet. But let's just imagine this person called Toninho. I'm going to read a bit from my diary from this moment, and my diary is so sporadic. I think I wrote a bit on my phone, wrote a bit in a sketchbook, wrote a little bit. I'm just the most terrible diary keeper. Today, I really started to feel something special and understand the value of these walks of exploration. Toninho was our guide, the first woman. What a difference. 65 years old, about 18 grandchildren, and so much life experience and knowledge of the local plants and the properties interwoven with life stories. What it is to be a woman, endless work. The expectation that she's always available to babysit her grandchildren. The humanity of bringing hot coffee and a little tablecloth laid out with a simple picnic of couscous with egg, banana and peanuts. She brought us to the best view yet, so high up overlooking the valley. And then, after talking about her role as a spiritualist, she broke into song, so beautiful, it brought tears to my eyes. So these engagements with people, is talking with people, is just so powerful. And it's not just a one-way street, it's engaging in both ways. She wasn't just telling us about her life, we were talking about ours. And we had so much fun. And I am terribly privileged to have had this type of interaction. And I made so many different works. I had so many pictures. I started with about 60 pictures in my folder, and I knew I couldn't show you anything. in this space of time. And I really have so much more I want to do with this project. So here we have the early beginnings of a project that I introduced you at the very beginning. And this is Weeds Our Community. I chose this title as weeds as a term that sidelines plants. It makes them sound separate from the rest. The same way certain members of our community are sidelined and seen as not as important. This was a micro commission I won from Somerset Artsworks, and I gained it just before I went to my residency in Brazil. I just wanted to arrive back from Brazil, sort of landing on my feet, putting all my energies into something else. I was very lucky to get it. And that I invited Claire Beale to collaborate with me, and it was one of the best decisions I made because she's amazing. She's embarrassed again. I'll read to you out of the Saw brochure, that's the Somerset Artsworks brochure, what they said about this event. It was an interactive walk highlighting specific weeds within Broome town. Plants you might walk past, finding sanctuary in the walls, reaching up from drains or pushing through cracks in the pavement. It involves sculptural intervention, performance, and engaged community to highlight or celebrate these small, determined life forces in tandem with the human spirit. So I was excited by these plants growing everywhere in Broome, but everywhere I was going actually, especially because nowadays there's got a new policy where they're not using weed killer, the people who cleans, well actually in Bath, because I've heard when I was at the hairdressers, that they're being asked, that street cleaners are being asked to weed the streets, and he was very indignant. His name was Elvis. If anybody knows Elvis in Bath, but he was very indignant. He left his home depot, there's no way. I found a parallel between these beautiful determined plants and that of people moving forward against the odds. So the walk travelled around different, had a route around Broome, and it was based on the plants we found there. And this is the gully down to Cheap Street in Broome. And I'll just read out to you a little bit from the newspaper that is a bit that I wrote and Claire added to and edited. The weather was kind as the crowd gathered. They experienced sculptural intervention, sound, performance, beautiful Ganesha chanting amidst overgrown disorder, images that flew up into the air. That was Claire's beautiful piece. A tower built and deconstructed again as an ode to meadowgrass, dandelions, ribwort, plantain, life-affirming penny whistle, little boats that spun down Cheap Street gully, and the waving of flags as final celebration of the plants and the community of Broome. The boat release was a highlight, a coming together of everyone, with passers-by joining in, young and old alike. Now, community engagement was an important element of this project, including individuals and Broome-based groups. So we had Pod Plus for young adults who have additional needs, and Active in Touch Broome, which helps combat isolation and loneliness, two amazing groups. Participants cast votes. So I've got them here, like so. Just trying to do a bit of to Zoom thing. There. Very simply cast, just with tissue paper, incredibly, but with PVA, so they're slightly waterproof. I've lost my place. And they printed flags, so we did all sorts of botanical printing. They were workshops run by myself and Claire, and they were used during the event. But the people also shared their determination, their stories, and humour, which also hugely informed our outcome. I'll read the last bit. Lucy said, "This event highlights the things that we walk by that appear to be insignificant. To focus on plants considered as weeds, I think, starts a discussion surrounding our attitude towards plants. and whether the one planted in a flower bed has more value than one grown from a crack in the pavement. It says a lot about our feelings of control concerning our environment. Nature, though, has a life force of its own regardless. Oh, hello, didn't know I put that one in. We're going to come back to that. So there's Mahesh, who you heard chanting earlier, and I encountered Mahesh. Well, to be honest, I encountered him on a dance floor because I love dancing. He was dancing, and we kind of got on pretty well. And I knew that he ran a restaurant in Frome, and he cooks a lot. Obviously, he deals with plants and vegetables. And I knew it'd be interesting to talk to him. I didn't know what would come of it, but I knew he'd have something interesting to say. And as we talked, he told me that when he washes kale, he likes to use a Ganesha mantra. And Ganesha is the Hindu god of obstacle removal. And it really got my imagination going. I just thought, this is perfect for my project. It really, and he kindly let me record him chanting. And we did this, used his chant down Apple Alley, and anybody who lives in Frome, or not, I think we've got people from Brazil here and other people. It's the most, I'd say the most medieval street in Frome, and it's the sort of one that most people avoid, I'd say. I love it, but it's full of bins, absolutely full of pigeon poo, pigeons, weeds, etc. So of course we had to bring our group down the alley. And by the time we got to the end of the alley, it has these basement lights. So if you imagine the windows in the basement, and they have a sort of grill over the top of them. And up from the grill are pushing the most amazing, beautiful ferns and plants. So I got everyone to look down that, and then we played that chant. And I really think it transported us into this hidden space. It sort of transported us. Now, this is a piece I specifically made, a piece of work, and it's called Queen of Meadows. And it was an ode to Elsie Meadowgrass and determination. And this, if you see on the left, it's Kingsway in Frome. And in those cracks between the pavements, we've got meadowgrass growing out of them. So here I am, I'm building a precarious tower. I'm wearing a crown of grass on my head. I'm building up from nothing. So those wooden pieces and the boards are all on the floor. And then as I get to the top, I place the crown on the top, and we stand back and look at the tower. And then I put the crown back on, and then I do it all again. I take it all down again to nothing where it began. And actually, it also had some other cast elements on, such as this, which some might think is maybe a dollop of ice cream, but for me, it's like a spark, the human spark of what drives us on. And I had to be very practical with this because it's absolutely hollow, it's only tissue, and there's a rock in the bottom because it's quite windy out there in Frome. Oh, we also had one of the boats that I wanted something that someone else had made on it, and that was one of the boats that somebody had cast on the sculpture and put that on the sculpture with a bit of aluminium and floats. It's sort of a melted piece to weigh it down. And there we have, most importantly on the right, we have Elsie, and she was part of Active in Touch group. And we are running a workshop there on botanical printing for our flags. And she did, the beauty of this project was our engagement with people was just had so much more depth to it. My residency was like 3 weeks long. You can only do so much in that. We'd already worked with these two groups, Pod Plus and Active in Touch. So we already had, we'd already built up a layer. And we knew when we designed the walk that most of the people in the groups probably wouldn't come on the walk, and that didn't matter either, because after the walk, for example, with Active in Touch, I went back and I shared every element, and it was a joy, and it was probably richer than the walk, and I think Elsie, she got a bit teary, but in a nice way. She just, and the person next to her just nudged her and said, see Elsie, someone does care about you. You know, it's sort of this isolation, loneliness. And, you know, we've got some invested interest in those groups now. I definitely want to continue this project and I'll be going back to those groups. So we just finished our walk and we're, you know, done all of that project and the workshops and the things, and we're both incredibly exhausted, ready to go to bed now. I really wanted to rest. And then Emma Warren, who's sitting there, who runs the Black Swan Art Gallery, and if anybody doesn't know the Black Swan Art Gallery, it's in Frome, and it's just an amazing space. You must go and visit it. It's a wonderful environment, and it's there for the people. You know, it's a space. It's what's the word I'm looking for here? It's a service, actually. So make sure you use it if you ever come to Frome, go to it, make things happen there because it's there for you. There's some said a bit. So what you see here, this is me finishing up here, hoping everyone's still awake. This is near the end of our walk, actually, near the beginning of our walk, and it's all based on dandelions. Now this is obviously a picture of the walk in the exhibition, and it was all done on just a normal photocopier, slightly pixelated, because when we did our walk, Claire made this really lovely art object, which was like a map, really useless for use, but a beautiful thing. And it was like a fanzine. It was kind of cut and paste and kind of black and white photocopied and kind of folded in a lovely way. And I kind of really liked that feeling. So we thought this kind of photocopy really like that. And this whole bit is all about dandelions. And we're reading from our little books there. We've got our backs, we're standing on these little ledges, our backs against what we call the graffiti wall. It actually used to be an old abattoir, which is really bizarre. Not so long ago. And to the left, you can see on the wall is some words, and that's what Claire was reading. She was reading out the names of dandelions. It's got all sorts of different names, so things like dunderhead, so if I'm wrong, milk thistle, yes, I remember. And on the right, we've got a list of other names, and these are the names of Colleen. And Colleen was a member of Active in Touch. Colleen's 8 children and 27 great and great-grandchildren. And I read those out. And it was a lovely sort of parallel between this beautiful plant, which I believe originated from Egypt. And underneath that, you can see are those blue little triangle windows, which we call windows, I did anyway, dandelion windows. And we invited participants to find a dandelion. There's like a strip of grass there at the bottom, and put a window on it to really highlight these beautiful flowers and plants that people generally are finding a pain wanting to get rid of. And just before I'm just about to finish my talk, we literally had to think on our feet with this exhibition. We had hardly any uni, really little time. And we didn't want it just to be a documentation board. We wanted it to be a thing in itself. And I really feel like the sort of objects we made and the actions were a thing of beauty in themselves. And I think we really pulled it off. And I'm very proud of that. You know, we had the film, the Mahesh film also, and lots of other things. I didn't think of showing much more of the exhibition because I thought we'd run out of time, but we probably have. Yeah. So now this is a wonderful woman called Martha who I met in Geelong, and she shared so much about plant lineage with me. She talked through all the plants outside the back of this little shop, and told me how I could get rid of my sore throat, or if I had my elbow hurt. I really want to meet with her and collaborate with her in some way. So what next? Well, it's going to involve having to find some funding. I just really want to continue my project in Brazil, but I also want to continue in Frome. And so you have to wish me luck, because I'm not the best fund finder, but I'm going to try. Anyway, I think that's probably it for today. Thanks. I hope you've enjoyed it.
shall we put something on you?
Do we have to?
Yeah.
Be very nice. That's fine. Yeah, too much of it. I don't know, what do you think? More lights? Yes. More lights, says Sue.
Okay, so we are going to use these microphones to ask questions so that it is also people on the recording. So apparently you have to press the button and
There we go.
okay, so we comment on question.
Thank you, that was a great talk, and it's absolutely wonderful to see some more of your time in Brazil. As you know, I was your biggest fan.
You were.
On that front. I'm sorry I missed your walking through because it looked absolutely brilliant, and it makes me really sad that I agree when you say about the weeds that in Free we've suddenly got this massive free hoedown going on, and they're just going around clearing all the weeds from everywhere, and it's the Green Party doing it, which I find very odd, but anyway, there you go. Because you know the whole world. I mean, I follow somebody else on Twitter, a big movement in London, which is all about keeping weeds and not getting and how important
Yeah.
it is. You know, this whole thing about this past summer where people have kept all their verges and you know let everything. So why is Spring gone actually bonkers? I'm really pleased she found some weeds still, but they've gone bonkers and clearing them away from everywhere.
Well, that first part of the walk when Claire did her piece was all about the fact down Church Walk, there's a whole wall where all these weeds were, and when we did the walk, they'd all been hoed out. So there was still the evidence. I mean, there was a beauty to that because obviously we were right next to the cemetery, and it's sort of things that had come and gone. But we knew they'd come back again because they always do.
Yeah.
Well, they don't always, but they generally do. But I think it's just a tweak in thinking, more than a tweak. And I think it's an obscure sort of, I don't know, it's a distorted way of thinking. Just it's thinking for a good reason, but not quite the right reason. And it needs to be sort of, doesn't it?
Will you do? I'd love you to do that walk again.
It depends how much you request to you. And if there's some money. I'm not some, but after all the work I've done.
Yes. So you're alluding to what going back to Brazil and working on. Have you got an idea what you'd like to do exactly?
What I would really like to do is quite fundamental, really. I would like to probably create a publication and possibly an exhibition based on plants and people. I want to learn their plant knowledge and have it sort of published because there's so much knowledge, but not really anything published, particularly in that northeast of Brazil area. But make equally of equal importance the people that I'm engaging with. So it's about them as well and their lives, because I think it goes hand in hand personally myself. But I'd also like to bring creatives in to reflect and respond. Also, I just think it would make a rich mix. And I've luckily through my residency, I've made some quite interesting connections in the northeast of Brazil. And am I really buzzing? I'm sort of how do we do? Shall I go like that? Shall I go like that? Is that better? Yeah. Yeah, so that's the sort of thing I'd like to do. I'd like it to be connected between England and Brazil. That's just sort of dialogue.
Through Q and connections with your
Q then. Q. Yes, I think Q has. I won't make comments about Q because my dad's watching. No, Dad. I know you'd make comments yourself. Not horrible comments about Q, but just about funding. It's sort of broad area, and I imagine I'm going to find funding myself, but then connect with Q for that, etc. So,
can you please tell me what bright yellow?
that's the piqui.
Okay. Oh, so
Yeah. If you want more details, look it up online.
Okay, amazing. Is it spicy?
Yeah, I don't know. No, I think it isn't sweet. I think it's for savoury dishes like stews and things like that. I think. Sorry, anybody. Okay.
Any other? Anyone else?
That's it. And there's the hook. No one online?
Okay, can you please tell us a bit more about the big push that you brought?
Oh yeah. This. Hang on, let me just grab it. Anybody? Yes. Yeah, this is just some grass. I'll just show that to everybody at home, in the comfort of their own homes. This whole bale of, do I call this a bale? I kept calling it a bale. I don't know. What do you call this? A sheaf of. Yeah, yes. This I harvested from a local field, and then I just dried it out, and it was part of our walk. So it was a little bit sort of, I suppose, almost paganistic in its way of having grasses, and we had, well, actually we didn't wear the grass crowns for that, but we had I had a circle made of grass, and we had the flags. It was just, I just wanted to parade these plants down the street the best I could and involve them with everybody and everything around. So, but in the actual exhibition we had them also, didn't we? And we had a whole area where you could put on the grass crowns and hold flags and photobomb your friends with these images, and that worked quite nicely. So yeah, and I just also found it comforting. I needed some comfort. I was coming to do a talk. It's nerve-wracking, and it just gave me comfort having these grasses, which I've spent quite a few weeks with now. So that's why the grasses are here. There we go.
So you have a question in the Zoom chat from Dennis, who says, you talked about the parallels between marginalized and marginalized peoples, which I think is called a beautiful link, and also a very interesting one. Can you say a bit more about how? Sorry. Yes, about the link, for example, the link between colonialism and exploitation of land, and people.
Yes, I can attempt it. I can't. I mean, for me, I suppose in me thinking about plants, for example, and I think I said in that comment about people's attitudes towards control and control of plants, that it's a whole attitude towards people in the same way that they, I suppose it's like feeling that if I have to talk about it in respect to plants, that you have total right over those plants and you are above whatever happens to them. You know, it's they are beneath you, and they are just there for your own devices, your own needs in life, and they've got no rights of their own, I suppose. That's one of my parallels between plants. You know, in other cultures there is a huge respect for plants, you know, a different perspective on plants. And I think only I can revisit my moments of childhood where plants were my universe, and were on an equal part to me. You know, they were the things I breathed and I lived. I'm very glad I grew up at that era without screens and stuff. But I feel like, in respect of people's attitudes towards people, equally, whether we like it or not, I feel like we're already judging somebody when we've just first seen them, aren't we? We're always putting people in pecking orders of who's what and who's whatever. And I feel that for me as an artist, I'm always being asked to try and solve all these problems and all these things. I don't have the solutions to them. And all I know is that the art that I have, the art skills that I have, use. So I said it's an important aspect for me is to start dialogues and connections with people and to create spaces for people to be together. And, you know, I work with such diverse groups of people. So I haven't really answered your question, Gladys, I'm sorry. But I can only, I'm very fundamental in my ways of thinking. I can only sort of talk with, you know, my role as an artist in this way. So yeah, sorry, but that was a bad answer. Yeah.
You talked about your appreciation of plants for their like more intrinsic value rather than academic value. Do you think this affects how you approach the art?
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of I'm really quite dyslexic, and I find it all these words and this Latin, and it really confuses me. And I you know, I'm interested in it to a level, but beyond that, it's much more intuitive. You know, I don't live in my childhood, but I have to always, I think as an artist, you think of those early informative years where you learnt about life, you put things in your mouth, you touch things, you know. I think for me, I'm intuitive. So although I've spoken with my dad, hello dad, about plants and things, I always feel like a bit of a doofus, you know, I feel like a bit of an idiot when I'm talking about things because I have a lack of knowledge and understanding of the scientific elements. But for me, I approach plants and have done in my project so far from in a more visceral way, you know, the feeling, the touch, the feeling of their presence around me, the smell, you know, it's all these kind of more things to do with my senses and my exposed past, my memories, and the way that they're connective. I can talk to people about plants, you know, looking at the ribworm plantain, you're talking to people about how you can turn it around, turn it into a gun, shoot it off into outer space, you know, and how dandelions have the piss the bed name. We talked about, you know, the thought about eating yourself if you've eaten some, you know, all of this sort of stuff for me is the interest. And I really like a lot of the common names actually. And some of the names in Brazil they give to plants in the common name quite rude. I was going to share it, but I thought it was a bit too rude. But it's really great. So yes, did I answer your question? Good. Yeah.
You can also comment, so you can also share your own insight, or you can tell me about yourself and how you feel connected.
You definitely have to tell a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Emma from Maxwell Arts Centre. So I just want to say thank you and well done on the project. It was really fascinating. I know we turned around the exhibition quite a short amount of time. But you can see its impact on connecting people in the communities, especially when they had a chance to enjoy the space themselves. And even, as you know, the volunteer stewards, the tenants, and the cafe staff. And it was just something very interesting about the what about how we came together. Really, you can't fail to be absorbed by those stories. And I just want to say well done. You know, have to speak that from all, which is amazing, but it really moves people. So I think when the person says you think what's the plants, what's the weeds, but then when you put it in that context, I think it's just really impressive to everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, I would like to maybe ask you a bit more about your Brazilian experience. So I didn't go to Chapada Diamante. I almost went there. So I went to Salvador, where I was staying at a friend's house. So my friend is a Brazilian girl who lives near Kew Gardens, and her friend was a researcher who was working at the University of Bahia and who was coming to Kew to research. So I stayed with her, and she took me a bit around, and she took me to market where we met an indigenous person who was selling plants at that market, and those plants came from the Amazonian forest. So and it was I remember that I bought
a bath there. So I bought a bunch of herbs that you use to cleanse yourself. And this was incredibly, the smell was fantastic. So it was very odorant, and I had to go home and I had to boil those in special way and then splash it on me to cleanse myself. And that was just one of the many herbal things that he was selling for all kinds of purposes. And I mean it's just amazing because everything grows there. So I saw that I went several times to do research, and there was something that was growing in our garden, and somehow it was blocking the sewers, so you couldn't there were 2 bathrooms and you couldn't flush any because it was just not going down because the plant roots came into the house. At the university where I was working at in Rio, there was a mango tree that grew into the house. So you really had this feeling that the city was a kind of tropical forest that tried to interrupt human activity in all kinds of way, and if you just stop doing uprooting, they will just take over in no time really with the climate there. So how can we match that? But I think there are a lot of allied knowledges. You also mentioned the Quilombo's and Quilomboros who have also this herbal knowledge that comes from a mix of African knowledges and indigenous Brazilian knowledges, and I think those knowledges are very much alive. I think that we also have these or have these, but maybe it's a bit more lost, or maybe our plants are not our first port of call when we have a headache or when we have a sore throat, or maybe for some people they still are, but maybe not so many more. So are we losing this? Can we learn from the Brazilians? Can we do some exchange in a kind of the knowledge kind of way as well? Or
Yeah, I think, I mean, yet again, I'm not some huge knowledge about what I know that there have been connected projects, and obviously there are lots of botanists often the medicinal properties of things have often been the funding behind the finding out of plants, etc. But I knew I'd get into hot water and people started asking me anything technically involved with the botany. But I think there's always sharing to be done, especially on a maybe a less academic level. I think from people just connecting and talking and sharing. I find women are pretty good at this in a different way. I'm sorry, men in the room. I find we approach things in a slightly different way, and it doesn't have to be a big song and dance. Sometimes it's just sitting around eating a meal and talking about these things. You can learn a lot and then share with other groups of women. And I kind of like that sort of approach myself, less sort of out there, more kind of undercover, but filtering through. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way I feel about it.
So some people already left, and maybe you are going to be next. So just to do a bit of publicity for Lucia's work, she's running an art workshop that is connected to this talk tomorrow from 5 at the 448 art space. And then on the 11th, we have a talk here from Nicolas Pinas, who is a PhD student who comes from a Maroon community in Suriname, and he's going to talk about rice and women. And
oh, I want to go to that one.
Oh yeah, you are going, because you are supposed to be the artist who does the workshop.
I am going to that one because I'm doing the workshop for that, but it's going to be such an exciting talk.
Yeah.
It's February.
Yeah, the art workshop is going to be the long stay. Please, if you are happy to come back to that. We also like to connect people a bit with these talks, and it would be nice to have a kind of returning audience, or bring your friends if you have any who are interested in this topic. That would be really nice.
Okay. I think that's it.
Few flyers from the people there, so please speak. We also have a feedback form, so you can pick the boxes and say something on the form. That would be nice. Yeah, thanks for coming.
It's a Zoom. No, it's still there. Oh,
You do ballet?
sorry.
You do ballet?
I used to dance. Did you?
Yes, I always wanted to do as a child. But yes.
Or there are some things in the chat.
Do you recall?
I do know, yes, yeah, it's very short. It's people in the facility here.
Well, yes, good. I'm glad you have. I feel like you have.
So she did that in city for the bar, so she would be from the